Well, welcome everybody to the Roots Action No Honeymoon for Biden Thursday call series. Today we have Kenzo Shibata on. We will get to that in just a moment. And real quick, Kenzo, we were just talking about the teachers getting the first dose of vaccines. Liz Eiler just let me know that by the end of March, that was what Biden said, to vaccinate all U.S. teachers. So a little sooner than I said, but still. All right. Well, so everybody knows, these calls are really designed to be both educational, engaging, and fairly easy ways to really take action and fight the neoliberal corporate establishment, and to really push back against Joe Biden and everything he is doing that is antithetical to the progressives and the Black and brown communities that put him in office. We will lose in 2022 and 2024 if we do not have major accomplishments, and especially if he doesn't follow through on so many of the promises he made. Today, we are going to be focusing on Rahm Emanuel, who is being floated right now to be an ambassador to either Japan or China, neither of which make any sense at all. And we are going to get to that in a little bit. Kenzo is a Chicago-based teacher. So he knows a lot about what's going on, and he knows a lot about Rahm Emanuel. We are live streaming on Facebook. You can also catch this on YouTube on Friday when I get that uploaded. A quick update on where we are with No Honeymoon before we go into the program. First off, thank you, everybody. Thank you. We sent about 25,000 emails to senators urging them to reject Neera Tanden, and we rejected Neera Tanden. There weren't a lot of allies in this fight besides people like you, besides real progressives, real leftists out here. So just thank you. I'm getting chills right now. It was one of the best feelings of my entire life. So yeah, just honored to be a part of a group that helped make that happen, and who was willing to stand up to that kind of power. And we won. So not much better. I mean, maybe if we would have gotten like some progressives on board, that would have been great too. But nonetheless, they didn't run to her aid, which is great. And we should take credit for that. Couple other things, in that fight would have been totally focused on mean tweets if it wasn't for groups like us. And as I was reminded, Code Pink as well, really going out there and saying, no, this is a fight about policy. You can watch this. If you go to the Young Turks channel, Jeff Cohen, one of our co-founders, was on there just a couple days ago. The day Neera was rejected is when the video aired. And he had a little debate with Cenk. Cenk had been saying that we should approve Neera Tanden and that this tweet stuff is nonsense and after Trump and yada, yada, yada. Jeff Cohen went on there, and by the end of an 11-minute conversation, Cenk changed his mind and said, you know what? You're right. We must reject Tanden. So that is just another, I'm just thankful for Jeff and for our team and for getting out there and really leading in this effort. We also tweeted #RejectTanden, which we invented over 30,000 times, went super viral. At one point, it was the 16th biggest trend on planet Earth. So another just big win for us. So I'm just so proud of our team and all of your work. Next week on this call, I haven't locked in exactly who the speaker is going to be, but we are more than likely going to be continuing to focus on Rahm Emanuel, because I imagine he's just going to start getting more support. He's going to start getting his allies on board. You're going to see op-eds pop up, all this wild stuff. We know how the establishment does it. We get it. We are here to fight them, and that's exactly what we are going to do. If you are not already a part of our team, if you're not an official volunteer, I urge you to go to nohoneymoon.org and sign up. I will email you. I will get you involved, and you can start joining more of these conversations. You'll get weekly emails from me with actions. I have a link tree with dozens of different actions you can take. We've sent so many emails and messages to representative senators and the White House already. So definitely join us if you haven't already. With that, we are now ready to move on to the official program. Joining us today is Kenzo Shibata. He is a Chicago-based teacher, an organizer, a streamer of the Class Time Pod, and he is here to talk about Rahm Emanuel and how terrible of a job he did in Chicago. Kenzo, how are you doing?
Ryan, thanks so much for having me do this. There's no shortage of things that are bad to say about Rahm Emanuel. I can't think of anything good to say about him. Like he looks like he gets regular haircuts and they look nice. I guess
He
that we'll
bathes.
start there. We'll start with a nice thing. I'm a teacher. That's what we do. Like if we have a troubled student, we talk to the parents. We start with something nice. And Rahm Emanuel's hair always looks very nice. We'll start there.
That's hilarious. So I guess I want to give you the floor for a couple minutes and just talk about your experience in Chicago, how long you've been in Chicago, your experience with Rahm Emanuel, your experience as a teacher. He was very openly hostile towards
Mm-hmm.
teachers. And then your thoughts on him being considered for an ambassadorship to China or Japan. So yeah, the floor is yours.
I don't know if I'm more offended as a Chicagoan or as a Japanese American that this is going to be a possibility. I don't really want him to be in my motherland or in my hometown. Um, and I don't wish him on China either. But the thing with Rahm Emanuel is that where do we even start? Well, I think it started when he was running for mayor in 2011. We had this awful blizzard that it Lakeshore Drive is a main thoroughfare through Chicago that connects the north side with the south side, and cars were stuck on this highway, and it was really awful. And the people that really came through this particular winter were the public workers, Ask Me members mostly, digging people out on Lakeshore Drive, going above and beyond the call of duty. And then I believe the second day into the blizzard, Rahm Emanuel unveils his first campaign ad called Service. And the tenor of the message of the ad was that you are public workers, you work for me. When I'm mayor, you will work for me and I'm going to get work out of you or I'm going to fire you. And, he was wearing like a warm, fuzzy sweater while doing it. But, that was the bottom line. And we knew at that point, like he had thrown the gauntlet down. Like our public workers are really, they fuel the city. Our public workers in Chicago are notoriously good. And he decided to basically stab them when they were in, not only just, in a time when they were doing good, but like public sentiment around public workers was pretty good at that point. And we saw that like his candidacy was not just one person with an ego trying to become the mayor of Chicago, but an actual attack on public services and on the social safety net of Chicago. And then as soon as he won, some of the things he did was so we have this escape clause in the contract that the Board of Education and the teachers union had at the time, that if there was a financial emergency, they could rescind a promised negotiated 4% raise. And the first thing that Rahm did as mayor was cook the books, essentially, use a creative accounting to make it look like the school system was doing a lot more poorly than we were, and then took away that raise, which of course was awful. Like that 4% is pensionable. It screwed over a lot of people, not just, people who are ready to retire. Like, that decreased their wages basically for the rest of their natural lives. And it, we all banked on, being able to pay our rent and groceries with that money. So it was awful because it was definitely a big blow to us materially, but it was also great for agitating. And immediately the Chicago teachers, even before we really got solidly organized, knew that Rahm Emanuel hated us, and for no good reason. He didn't send his kid. He doesn't send his kids to Chicago public schools. He sends his kids to private schools. And then after basically giving us this huge pay cut because we had to work just as much, but for 4% less, he worked with this group called Stand for Children, which was a group that the bottom line is they wanted to privatize, charterize the entire school system. And what happened there was they had this partnership where they put out this message that Chicago students were missing out on 4 years of education, and students in Houston they counterposed to say they got 4 years more education if you just, count the minutes, which was based on a lie. And even Stand for Children later on record admitted that was a lie that they used to push a change in policy. What the sneaky accounting they used there was a moment in I believe it was the 90s when the Chicago Teachers Union and the Board of Education were hitting kind of a standstill in negotiations, and so the teachers decided that as a a concession, they would, instead of taking a lunch at the beginning of the day, they would take their lunch at the end of the day. And that meant that the school system could save countless dollars on people monitoring students in the cafeterias or at recess and things like that. So this is, again, teachers making a sacrifice for the greater good. Because teachers didn't want to take their lunch at the end of the day. They wanted to take it in the middle of the day where they can, hang out with their colleagues and, enjoy their lunch. But they took that sacrifice. And so what Rahm did was he calculated the hours based upon all things being equal with lunch times. So the Chicago schools, even though we let out a little earlier than maybe the Houston schools did, the hours were not different at all. And so he was able to force the longest school day, as we called it. And, immediately there were issues with that. Like, students were not being able to participate in sports or activities or get tutoring after school because they would have to be out after dark. Some students had to work after school to support their families. So, what things are going to go to the wayside would be like a chess club or things like that would enrich them and make them more eligible for scholarships down the line. So Rahm Emanuel, we just knew right off the bat, like, first of all, he cut our pay and then gave us more work to do. And it's not even that he was just giving us more work. It was unnecessary work. It was an unnecessarily long school day, which we're still feeling the reverberations now because we have a mayor who's forcing us to teach, those of us who are teaching distance, students are sitting behind a screen for 7 hours. Or in the case where there are in person, they're having to, learn in masks behind plexiglass for like these very long days now. It's very stressful. And, we're seeing the trauma already. But these were things that Rahm Emanuel did not take into account 10 years ago. But they were huge wins, and he used them in his reelection. Like, this is kind of like why I'm talking about how Joe Biden, how that first 100 days is just BS. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just his way of getting reelected, I think, in a few years, to say, like, I had these goals and I hit these goals. And I think Rahm Emanuel did a very similar thing. He lengthened the school day. That became what he ran on. He did, X, Y, and Z things. There was one thing, though, that he managed to hide, and that was the murder of a 17-year-old Black youth named Laquan McDonald, who was murdered by Chicago police. And there was footage of it where it was extremely clear. The young man was shot 16 times in the back. There was absolutely no reason for his murder. And it was very clear that the police side of that situation was false, just a lie. And that footage of it, Rahm Emanuel managed to work with state's attorney at the time, Anita Alvarez, to have that footage kind of tucked away and hidden, so he could run his reelection campaign, which, this is something that's kind of gets glossed over. He ran against Chuy Garcia, who's now a current progressive congressman in the U.S. Congress, and he ran a pretty racist campaign against Chuy Garcia, where he implied that Chuy's family was involved in organized crime, that Chuy himself, it was like the racist kind of paternalistic messaging that, like, he can't handle a budget. Like that kind of stuff. It was a really nasty dog whistly campaign. Meanwhile, he was hiding the murder of a Black youth while doing this. He got reelected at this point, and then all these things came out, and then his second term for him, like, it's really a testament to Chicago and the kind of chutzpah that we have is we made his life we made his life hell. And it wasn't just one or two groups. It was I mean, his natural adversaries would be like the Chicago Teachers Union, not because we were going after him, but because he was always going after us. And all that we were doing was continuing to organize and continuing to build bridges with everyone else who was pissed off at him, which was becoming an easier and easier task throughout his second term. He was just that bad. And at that point, other groups that like maybe were a little more hesitant to push against him were coming forward. And, you know, I have to think that, you know, he's a smart guy. He's a creature of DC, that they were looking at the numbers and they were like, there's no way in hell that he was going to get reelected a third term. So he didn't run for a third term. And that second term was just, you know, fraught with, you know, protests with him for him. And a lot of, you know, his former allies were even turning on him. You know, typically the mayor of Chicago, you know, if we're talking about the dailies, for decades, Richard Daley was able to like have one vote against his budgets. Rahm started to get split votes, you know, and Rahm was able to like, not able to, but like there was actually a growing progressive movement within the city council to push up against him too. So like basically his name is mud in Chicago. And I think the bottom line and the reason why we were going so hard against him when when his name first came up for a possible role in the White House was we don't want that to happen. And we want the rest of the nation to know how his name is such mud in Chicago. Like if the rest of the nation understood him the way we understood him, there'd be no chance at all of his name being up for any kind of higher office. So yeah, we need to continue telling these stories. And one thing actually, two things I didn't mention was he closed 50 schools in one fell swoop, all in Black and brown neighborhoods. And why did he do this? Well, you know, if you look in the Uptown neighborhood, one of those schools is now literally condos, luxury vacant condos, because everyone is damn broke. No one can afford these things. The kids could use a school though. You know, the kids needed a school in Uptown. That was a school that serviced a lot of, you know, families that were houseless or under, you know, kind of transient, you know, living conditions. That was a community for a lot of families, that school. And now it's, you know, it's empty luxury condos. And, you know, the insult to it is like they kept the gymnasium floor on it with the mascot, like really disgusting shit. But, so pardon. But he did that in one fell swoop in one school year. So, you know, that had huge reverberations. Like students then had to, for the first time, cross gang boundaries to get to their new school because their old school was closed. They had to, you know, no one was taking into account like the kind of divisions that are in these neighborhoods. And, you know, Chicago is just a very segregated city. And so it wasn't like students were being sent to more affluent schools. They were being sent to other schools in their neighborhoods that were also being underfunded and now overcrowded. And in that same year, he managed to close half of the public mental health clinics. So you have people that are heavily traumatized because their schools are closed. And now they're having to deal with crossing gang territories. And, you know, for a lot of these young people and even their parents, these mental health facilities were critical in keeping them alive. And if I had to like boil down Rahm Emanuel's 2 terms in Chicago, I would have to say, you know, trauma was the theme. The theme was like compounding trauma on top of trauma and then leaving the rest of us, you know, to fix his mess.
Yeah. I mean, what's wild is I only live 2.5, 3 hours away from Chicago. And what I know of Rahm Emanuel is essentially Laquan McDonald. And there's so many layers and layers. And yeah, I think trauma is the exact right word to describe his tenure as mayor. Do you think that Laquan McDonald was a major turning point, or do you think that it was just building and building and building, and the forces who were opposing Rahm Emanuel were going to be there no matter what? Or do you think the Laquan McDonald situation, which really, for me at least, nationalized and put him in such a spotlight, like how important was that for this? And I guess, how do you think, or what do you think is the most powerful way to explain to everyone else, normies as we might call them, that he is absolutely unacceptable?
You just have to like strip the fact that, you know, he was affiliated with the Obama White House, or, you know, remember that he got kicked out of literally working in the Obama White House. Like Michelle Obama couldn't deal with him. Michelle Obama went on record saying she could not stand the man, and she is one of the most revered people. I mean, she's good buddies with George W. Bush now, and she can't stand Rahm Emanuel. Maybe that's what we should tell the normies. But you know, just Rahm Emanuel is, he was notorious as a congressman. This is something he did. This is sexual harassment. Like, you know, the bottom line, we didn't look at it, I think, at the time, because this is before the Me Too movement. And, you know, people also don't want to think about like men sexually harassing other men too. I think that's also part of kind of baked into, you know, the misogyny that is, you know, our society. Was like, he would corner other men in the bathrooms, or the not the bathrooms, but the shower rooms in Congress, like where the gyms were, buck naked, and like, you know, poking at their chest, saying, you know, you're going to get this bill, you know, passed, or you're going to vote this way on this bill. And, you know, looking back on it, like he seemed to at least love having these kind of stories leaked. There are a few other things that I'm just not going to repeat, of things that he said to like interns that were very insulting and sexist and misogynist and homophobic, that, you know, he would love to have these things leaked. And then once they were leaked, you know, he would just kind of act coy about it. And, you know, this is a very real way of how he, you know, interacts with people. He's a bully, and he's someone that, he's not a very strong person on his own, but he's very good at fundraising. And that's how he was able to like create his, you know, build his political bones. And through that, like, he basically is a bully for much, much wealthier people. And, you know, we don't talk all, you know, about how the actual conduct he used was harassment and abuse. And, you know, the way he treated underlings as abuse. And, you know, maybe that should be what we're looking now. Now we're talking about Andrew Cuomo. Rahm Emanuel, not that far off in the way he treated his staff.
Right. And, you know, I'd heard some of those stories, the naked shower interactions, that people were very weirded out about. Some people weren't even sure why he was there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've heard from people as well, he is the biggest leaker who has ever been in DC. He leaked everything. He knows every single person in the media. And that is one of his goals, is having a relationship with these people. You mentioned he's a big fundraiser. And I think that brings up a major point. And a couple people in the chat, including Bill, have pointed out it's similar with Neera Tanden too. You have these fundraisers who are so closely connected to big names. So for Rahm Emanuel, it's Barack Obama. For Neera Tanden, that's a Hillary Clinton attack dog. Does it feel like to you that Biden is owing them something? Like, what is going on here a little bit? This feels as corrupt as anything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Joe Biden, his political career was supposed to be over. He was supposed to be the ice cream meme guy. And, you know, I mean, the thing is, he had his terrible past, you know, what he did to Anita Hill, you know, the crime bill. Like, he was never thought of as like being an angel with a clean face, but like kind of being the VP and the ice cream memes and all that stuff, you know, that was his exit. And that was actually a pretty sweet exit for him. Like, and I think the world would be a better place maybe if he you know, if that could just have happened. But whew.
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you think what do you think beyond the blatant corruption? Like there has to be another reason. Why does Biden think it's logical to try to confirm Rahm Emanuel for these particular positions, ambassador to Japan or China? Why those positions? Those are huge. What, number 2, number 3 economies in the world? That's a huge position. Why Rahm Emanuel? Why there? Couldn't he give him something smaller to appease him? Why such big, powerful positions?
I mean, my thinking on it is that Rahm Emanuel is, I mean, he's a business guy, you know. I mean, like, he knows how to like leverage his political connections to make his friends richer. And, you know, that's, I don't know the specifics of, you know, how he could do that in his role, but, you know, that's all I can really think about. And the thing that I think the very glaring contradiction here is the fact that Rahm Emanuel, like I was saying, he built his entire career and his power around the idea that he's like this mean bully, and that, you know, the shower room stuff and all that. And also, by the way, he had a private meeting with former president of, or, you know, president emeritus of the CTU, Karen Lewis, you know, rest her soul, where he said the F word. You know, he said "F you, Lewis" to her, and this was their first one-on-one personal meeting with each other. She was there to get to know him. Like, they weren't even part of this. Wasn't negotiations, and he, I guess, wanted to like establish that he was going to be the heavy in this relationship. And like, first of all, you don't do that to Karen Lewis. I know, talking to her about that story, like, she laid right back into him. But, you know, it was one of those stories too. Like, I think that was a double-edged sword, because once that came out in the public, he thought, well, you know, now, you know, in the past, you know, these stories made him seem powerful and strong. Now it really did make him look like he's a bully. Karen Lewis being this revered, loved teacher of 2 decades. So I think when Rahm Emanuel came to Chicago, one of the things he didn't understand was that it's not DC. And, you know, we're a town of working people. And when you try to knock people down a peg, you're knocking down people's neighbors, and you're knocking down, you know, their teachers. You're not just knocking down another politician. And, you know, that was part of his downfall. And to think that he is the person we're going to send to any other country to represent us as America, you know, that's just flat on its face ridiculous.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm going to start getting through some questions now from everybody, but this is a great conversation so far. Let's keep it going for a couple more minutes before we get into our action. Julie's asking, and I think this connects with what you just said. He is a bully. Chicago is not DC, but at the same time, he was a big enough bully to be kicked out of the White House. So was it mostly the Michelle Obama relationship? Was that why he left, or how bad was it? Or were there other things?
As far as I know, that's all there really was. I'm sure there was more behind it. And there was a lot of very just opportunistic timing. Like, Richard Daley, as powerful as he was kind of on his heels. I think his big project was to get the Olympics in Chicago. And there was such a huge movement against it that it didn't happen. And at that point, Chicago's ruling class, I think, needed another leader to fulfill its agenda. And, you know, Richard Daley also, at that time, his wife was very sick. Like, it just seemed like it was the right time for him to step down. So Rahm Emanuel getting kicked out of the White House for being annoying to people, that was probably part of it. But it also seemed like the business community in Chicago really wanted a heavy to come in and almost do like a fire sale, like just to sell off a bunch of assets very quickly. Because as much as Daley was able to do that, maybe he wasn't able to do it as quickly as to their liking.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Carol asks, can we get some talking points for our letters, emails? So for everybody to know, our action today, we're not going to be calling senators or representatives today. We'll still have some more Q&A, Kenzo, so hold tight. Sorry. But for talking points, I just posted a document at the bottom of the chat. So check that out. What we are going to be doing today for our action is writing a letter to editors of our local papers. Because Rahm Emanuel has not been selected yet, the best time to reject a nominee is before they are nominated. For example, Michelle Flournoy, she was supposed to be the head of the Department of Defense. She's supposed to be the Secretary of Defense right now. Most of us haven't heard her name, though, because she was destroyed before that happened. So we ended up with General Lloyd Austin, who has plenty of connections to Raytheon and this and that. But he is so much better than what we could have had, which is Michelle Flournoy, who is a war-first, warmonger, worst-case scenario. So that is why we're taking on this fight right now before he's actually even been selected for anything. Because if you can prevent the selection, that's the best case scenario for all of them, including Rahm and Joe Biden politically. And if they see which way the wind's blowing, especially Joe Biden, who is a weather vane in a lot of ways, that we have the most power right now. Getting Neera Tanden stopped was gargantuan, though, but we can't always count on that. So yeah, Carol, document I just sent, check that out. I'm going to go through a couple more questions. Im, your name is just Im in the chat, but maybe he wants to help Uber spread in those countries. His brother owns a big piece of Uber, apparently. Elizabeth asked, dissent, I don't know what his dissent is or where he's, I don't know the answer to that. He did volunteer service for the Israeli military on the Syrian border. I did not know that. Very interesting. Yeah, I guess, what do you think his chances are? Do you think Biden really wants this? Do you think he's being pressured to do this? Do you think this is just Rahm Emanuel planting stories because he's really good with the media in order to buy himself a position? Or do you think this is Biden's honest to God feelings?
You know, it's hard to tell. And I think with the Neera thing is they cut their losses because she was just, you know, obviously like the Biden administration wanted Neera Tanden because she would be a very much a team player. Like she is shown that she is very much willing to lie, cheat, and steal for the Democratic Party. And, but I think at the amount of noise that was against her, made it so the Biden administration just had to say, well, we could get someone else to do that too. Like there's no shortage of sycophants in DC running think tanks that they could throw into that position. So that's how I kind of felt about that. And with Rahm, I don't know. You know, it's interesting because the man definitely still has clout, but he's also very toxic in very many ways. You know, in this city, he's not going to get reelected to anything, or the state of Illinois. Congress, I don't think would happen again because he'd have to get elected in Illinois for that.
Right.
So I'm thinking like, you know, some sort of high profile appointment is important. You know, his brother still has a lot of clout. Right. And, you know, the ability to control the message out in Hollywood is important too. So keeping Rahm in your orbit is advantageous to you. If you're, you know, involved in Democratic Party politics. So yeah, I can't really tell. The only thing I do know is that our best bet is to make a lot of noise against it and to like remind people of who Rahm Emanuel is. You know, the man gets bird dogged, you know, anytime he makes public announcements in Chicago, anytime he's in public. So, you know, if we just can like hype that up nationally, I think that we could keep him out of power.
Yeah. Okay. One of our last questions for you here is kind of awkward to ask, but you brought it up first. But as a Japanese American, I don't know if that's how you identify, whatever, let me know. One thing we focus on at Roots Action a lot is peace. And there's problems in Japan with Okinawa, with the military bases there, and the soldiers get away with everything. Mm-hmm. What do you think this means to Japanese people? How will they take this? It seems so bizarre that someone who is so pro-war and pro-austerity, as Julia is pointing out in the chat, how will this be perceived there, if you have any insight?
I don't know how, excuse me. Um, yeah, I don't know how it would be perceived in Japan, but one thing I do, think about, and I'm glad you brought that up about Okinawa, is that having someone like him who is like, like a right wing Democrat, would mean that like there'd be no pushback on like, the military occupation of Okinawa. Like we really should have someone there who is going to take, some progressive stands. Like, the Japanese government, I'm a proud Japanese person, but, the Japanese government still hasn't, come to terms with comfort women in the World War II. The idea of forced prostitution that was happening, that's a very whitewashed history. Someone like Rahm Emanuel is not going to fight that. You know, I'm someone, I don't think very much about who the ambassador to Japan's going to be, but if we're going to choose someone, I would want someone who had, someone of a much more high moral fiber than Rahm.
Right, and especially someone, I mean, I learned this today, but in Japan's constitution, it's like fundamentally anti-war. Like they don't do war there, and it's something the people there take very seriously. And to put somebody in who was a cheerleader for the Iraq War, it just seems so backwards. And it just, the more you think about the selection to Japan or China, which is still the most shocking, comical part of it all, the more ridiculous it sounds. And then, and Norman says that's for sure. We need the opposite of austerity, and you're going to put a pro-austerity guy there. Why would we appoint this stunningly crass, brutal politician? I thought Biden was rejecting that. Yeah, any reaction to that from Julie?
I agree. Oh, hey, Julie. I know Julie. Oh. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. Like, that is the Democrat, just basically politicians. Everyone needs to like be running the opposite direction of the Andrew Cuomo's and the Rahm Emanuels and the Neera Tandons of the world, because the bottom line is they're all abusive, harassing people, and the details might be different and their tactics might be different, but they're the reason why politics suck, and the reason why like good morally high standing working class people hate politics and they don't want to get involved in organizing half the time, is because they have to rub elbows with these people who are just completely untrustworthy. So I totally agree with Julie here. Like we shouldn't be continuing to appoint these people, especially if the message that Biden wants to put out there is that we're progressing beyond this world of abusive leaders.
Yeah, we evolved from tough guy Trump to just tough guy other guys.
Yes.
It just doesn't make any sense at all. With that, Kenzo, thank you so much for joining us. If you have anything else you want to add, feel free, or we will go ahead and move on to our action. You are more than welcome to stick around, or you can head out. I'm sure you are a very busy man.
I think just what I want to kind of leave off with is, if you want to know more, Carrie Liderson put out this book a few years ago called Mayor 1%. It is great. Haymarket Books put it out. It's this thick and it's only one term. So like, if you want to get to know exactly how bad Rahm Emanuel was as mayor of Chicago, this is at least, a good entrance to that. But there's just so much to go on. There's absolutely no reason, any person, I think regardless of your political leanings, really, that Rahm Emanuel should be representing the United States in any capacity. But yeah, Ryan, thank you so much for having me on and giving me the floor to share all these experiences I had. And if, we're able to work together to stop this, then we're onto something good.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you. Solidarity forever. And thank you for being an ally in this fight to reject Rahm Emanuel. He is awful. And we really gotta keep the foot on the gas to make sure he does not end up an ambassador to some random country that he doesn't know anything about.
All right.
So thank you.
Take care, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Have a good one.
You too.
Everybody else on the call here, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can do this. Here we go. Now, today we have a little bit of a different action than we normally take. Normally we're on the phones or we're sending emails. Today, because Rahm Emanuel hasn't been elected yet, contacting senators, representatives might not be all that effective. But we know if we can get a wedge into the press, into the media, into the conversations that are going on about it, if we can plant those seeds to let people know, oh, you are not going to get this without a fight, that's what's most important. So what we want to do today is write a letter to the editor to our local newspapers. It's very easy to do. 99% of them will have a little form fill. You just put